Okay, now I'm going to create a virtual machine. So I'm creating a virtual machine. I usually use custom just in the case that I like being reminded of all the components that I'm choosing. And it does take you through. If you're thinking of when you create a virtual machine, you're actually going to the store and building the hardware. So you're like pulling this component off the shelf and this component off the shelf and this component off the shelf. So I'm going to click next on here. These are just compatibilities. It's kind of like saving a Word document in 2007 or 2000 versions or whatever. So you can make them backwards compatible. There is Workstation 9, 8, 6, and 7, but we will be using Workstation 9 as the most current. That does mean, though, that you will have to run this in VMware Workstation 9 if you have an old, or Fusion 5. If you have older versions, it won't work. So you will have to upgrade your Workstation or Fusion software. Clicking next, you can install it right. It says there's an installer disk image. I don't recommend doing it that way. VMware is really, really smart, and it tries to do a lot of stuff for you. So it says, oh, you're installing Server 2008. I know all how to do that. Just give me some information and I'll take care of the rest. That takes all the fun. You know, why should I let the software do the fun part for me? I want to do the interaction. I want to answer the questions during the install. So I'm going to install the operating system later. It also helps conceptually keeping the hardware and the operating system separate. I'm doing a virtual hardware right now. I don't even want the operating system to be involved, so that's what we're doing. So I'm going to install the operating system later. Now the guest operating system, this is not set in stone by any means. It's just going to help you give, it's kind of like going to the store and saying, you know what, I want to build this server. What do you recommend for processor and memory and that kind of stuff for me in the future? It's just going to give recommendations for the rest of your installation choice of your virtual components. You could choose anything. You could say, I'm going to install Sun Solaris, and you can install Linux on there. You get to choose your components anyways. It just gives recommendations later on. But in fact, we are going to be installing Windows Server 2008. So I choose Microsoft Windows, and then I choose Server 2008. And you can actually choose R2 if you want, because technically that's what we're doing. So I guess I will. I click Next on there, and now it's going to ask you for your virtual machine name and the location. This by far is the most important screen in the entire installation process. If you mess this up, you're going to end up saving it to your hard drive, your local hard drive. You're going to turn off your machine and it will be gone. And so I guess you get the opportunity then of doing it again. You know, as much as opportunities are admired, and you know, I suggest you take advantage of opportunities, this is one opportunity that you may not want to do consistently. So for the location, you need to put this on your portable hard drive. I organize mine this way. I have a D drive, and then on my D drive I have a separate folder for virtual machines. I keep all my virtual machines together, and then underneath the virtual machines I break them apart by class. So these are my network app virtual machines, my Server01 virtual machines, my Server2, my test VMs. These are the classes I have this semester, so that's all I have there. So I'm going to click on Server1, and I'm going to make a new folder. Now I have a couple of virtual machines under there that I've been playing with already, but I'll make a new folder for my virtual machine. If you remember, your virtual machine is a collection of files. They need to be stored somewhere. They could actually, just like your written comm homework and your psychology class homework, can all be mixed together in one folder. All your virtual machines could be mixed together in one folder. It's just a complete mess trying to have them organized or whatever. So keep them separate. So what you name it's completely your choice. I try to name it somewhat similar to what the actual virtual machine name is. So I'm doing Windows Server 2008 R2 is the folder I'm going to put my Windows Server 2008 R2 server in. And I click OK. This is the time to double check, make sure that you are putting in your D drive. Again, you get this wrong and it'll be a mess. It could be E. Oh, because your CD-ROM drive. Yes, I don't have a CD-ROM drive, so I bypass that. Yes, it could be E or F or G or whatever it's going to be. Yes, excellent point. Okay, so click Next then. Knowing that you're installing Windows 2008, it's giving you recommendations at this point. It's saying you only need a single processor. Your machine is capable of, seeing all your processors. You actually have 4 cores. They're each hyper-threaded, so it's going to look like 8 cores. We'll be fine with 1. Next thing is going to recommend 2 gigs of RAM on your Server 2008 server, which is perfectly fine. Again, if you want to bump it up, you certainly could. You have 16 gigs available to you. And this is where you can, like you can see, I can go up to 64. But maximum recommended here is 9. Well, I have 12 gigs on mine. You have 16 on yours. So your maximum is what they recommend. You need to leave some physically for your operating system to still function. So I'll keep it as 2 gigs. So I'm not changing anything there. We're going to keep this as network address translation from now for a network connection. It's pretty much kind of like working with your home network. There'll be a router in between. You have your own private network address, and then it's going to get translated out to a real address. We're really not doing a lot of networking stuff right now. Oh, we kind of are, but don't even worry about this. We'll get more into details of bridging and NATing some other time. But right now, we'll just leave it as NATing. And then we're going to add a hard drive controller. So click next. I'm going to create a new hard drive. So we're going to pull a new hard drive off the shelf. And it's going to be a SCSI because that's what they recommend. And we're not really working at that level, so we really don't care whether it's IDE or SCSI. And now it's going to recommend the maximum disk size. It recommends a 40 gig drive. Pull a 40 gig drive off your shelf. We will be doing a server upgrade. We're going to migrate to Server 2012. Let's give ourselves just a little bit of extra space. So I'm going to type in 60 gigs. What's nice about this is that it's not going to allocate. I'm not actually using up 60 gigs of my disk. I'm only using up whatever space is required, and then it grows as it's needed. So if I need to add more, it's going to add more in the background automatically without me even knowing it. Whether it's one file or multiple files doesn't make a difference. You can ignore the bottom. Is there a question?
You're like just 2 slides behind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going kind of fast.
That's okay. Sorry.
It's all the defaults. It's all the defaults.
Okay.
So we haven't changed anything yet, except for the hard drive size. So next on NAT, next on LSI logic, next on create a new virtual disk, and next on SCSI. And then this we upgraded to 60. You could probably get by with 40, but it doesn't cost you anything anyway, so why not give it a couple extra gigs, just a little extra space. So we okay? I'm going through kind of quickly, sorry. And now it needs to make a physical file to represent your virtual hard drive. The default naming. Always keep the naming itself. You can name it whatever you want. You'll match it all up, take care of it, but there's no need to really change it. And now you're done. So you built your hardware. When you click finish, it kind of tells you everything you got. You have 2 gigs of memory, you have a single processor, you have a 60 gig hard drive, you have a DVD drive, you have a floppy drive, you have a network adapter, which is going to use network address translation, you have a USB controller, you have a sound card, you have a printer, and you have a display. So that's the box that you built. We want to install an operating system now. Is everybody at this point? Okay. Now we want to install an operating system. How do you install an operating system on a typical physical machine? Open up the CD tray, put the physical CD in, close the tray, and boot. We're going to do the same thing, but we kind of do it virtually. We do have a CD-ROM drive, and we can actually put in, at this point, in our physical CD-ROM tray, our Server 2008 server installation disk. But we don't have to do that. We can do it kind of virtually. So I click on CD DVD drive, and it brings up your configuration for that device. I want to use an ISO image. I can use the physical drive, or I can use the file. Since I have the file, it tends to be faster, more portable, more reliable anyway. I'm just going to use the ISO file for that image of that disk. And that's going to browse for it now. So I click browse. Now you have to remember where you stored your stuff. I can't help you with that one. I can't answer it. Where did I download it? I don't know. I know where I put mine. I put mine in my D drive. I keep it in a folder called ISO images, And again, I kind of break it down by operating system in this case, though. Windows, and then server admin. So these are all the ISO images that I have. You're not going to have all of those. I have some old ones that were corrupt. And you should have the Server 2008 R2 Service Pack 1. Oh, no, wrong one. This one, Service Pack 1. If you look at the file size, it should be the one that's 3 gigs. Some of the older ones that I had were only doing 2 gigs. And this one seems to be working, so we're going to go with this one. But there could always be surprises, so we'll see. Is everybody that far? Did everybody find their ISO file? And we click OK. And now if you look at it, it's more or less inside that CD-ROM tray right now is a physical CD. But it's all virtual. Power it on. Let's turn it on. It boots. It has its own BIOS. It'll find the CD. It's going to launch from the CD. Windows is loading its files. And starting Windows. Now, some things you can do if you remember virtualization or don't. There's a couple key commands that you can work with. One is the Control-Alt-Enter. You might want to jot these down somewhere. If you do Control-Alt-Enter, it brings your virtual machine into a full screen view. In addition, when you do that, you still have this menu bar up on top. Kind of gets in the way, especially when later on when we get our screen to be full size. I usually unpin this. I click on the little pin next to it, and then it hides the bar. So it actually looks and feels like a full machine. If you need the menu still, you can always hover up and you get your menu, and you bring it down, and you're going to, have it go away. To bring it back out of that full screen mode, it's the Control-Alt-Enter again, and now you're in a regular windowed environment. You can resize it, you can drag it around, do whatever you want with it, but just realize you might end up having to scroll around to see the different parts of the screen then. So I typically like going full screen kind of right away and working in that environment. That's personally. Okay, comes up to the installation, all defaults. We're using English for the language, time and currency is English, then keyboard is US. I click next, and then I click install now. And it's starting up your setup. This is a list of options off this C that we can install. Server 2008 gave us 3 editions. They gave it, well, technically 4 for the web server, but really 3. We have standard, enterprise, and data center. You have one that includes a GUI, a graphical user interface, and starting with 2008, they included a core edition, which is purely command line. All you get is command line interface for the server. Yes? Did you copy down the new ISO file? Yes. The old one, I think, was corrupt because I spent probably many hours on the frustration of it not working. And I downloaded it twice, and it kept coming, and finally this one seems to be working. So, but I was downloading from home, and I have a really slow connection at home. So go ahead and copy the new file down from the server, the 172.16, 192.20 server, and it will be a little bit bigger. It should be a 3 gigabyte file. I'll keep going with this, and you can get caught up. It's not too difficult. We'll use the Enterprise Edition. That's kind of the typical install that people use. Standard was very stripped down, and Data Center was kind of the opposite extreme, like overly huge. Enterprise is pretty much what everybody chose, and the full installation is going to give us a graphical user environment. The server core is going to give it just a command line, so you have to do all your functions with command line. Now, as fun as that is, we're not going to do that today. We click next. Here's your license agreement. You can read through that and then accept it and click next. I've read it before, so make sure you read it. The next screen is a very confusing screen because it defaults to upgrade, but there's nothing to upgrade from. And if you click on it or hit enter, it'll say, oh, I don't know what you're talking about, because there's nothing to upgrade from. And it says advanced is custom. Well, that's what you have to do to install it. So it's not really advanced, it's basic. We need to install something new. So we're going to click install. Most servers have multiple hard drives on them, and so you have to figure out which one am I going to install the operating system on. Ours is pretty simple. We only have one to choose from, so we can click next again. And now it's going to do its thing. This will take a while, so this will be a perfect break time. It's going to copy the files, expand the files, install the features, and it's going to end up sort of doing the rest of the stuff on its own. It's a very basic bare install. There's a couple things we need to tweak to it, and then we can actually start working with it. So go ahead and take a break at this point, and we'll finish up the installation. It's going to reboot a whole bunch of times before it comes to the screen, so don't worry about that. It says the user's password must be changed. Go ahead and click OK. I'm using capital PA $W0RD, and I'll put that on the screen in just a second. And I'll end up logging in. The password's been changed. Let me find Notepad. I have it over here somewhere. That's what it'll look like. Capital PA $W. It's a 0, not a capital O. Okay, I'll move that side. It's always going to come up with this initial configuration tasks, and we will get to this. When we're done configuring it, you can check this box and say, do not show this anymore. And you can launch it separately if you need to, but it does want to take you through a couple things. Kind of prior to this, though, it doesn't have the same full screen resolution. There's some processor optimizations and just kind of extra tweaks that VMware Tools is going to help you out with. So we're going to install VMware Tools on this server and just help with optimizing it as a virtual machine. To do that, we go up to our menu up on top, up to our VMware workstation menu, and under the VM menu item, I choose Install VMware Tools. And it says click to install to connect the VMware tool to the CD and so on. This may take a while, so be patient. I don't know, the last couple times I've been doing it, it seems a little bit slower than before, so please be patient. Eventually it's going to come up and it's going to ask you if you want to run the software, the setup program. Yes. Is yours up already there? Yeah, I don't know what happened to mine. There we go. Run setup 64. And we do want to run the setup. Just be careful a little bit. Once in a while with this initial configuration tasks window up here, it might be running in the background, so watch your system tray in the bottom or your taskbar on the bottom. We really don't need this initial configuration one anyway right now, so you can close that. When we reboot, it'll launch automatically again, but just make sure that you find it. And then when you close the initial configuration window, it wants to automatically launch Server Manager because it's just trying to guess at what you want to do. We don't need those right now. Just click on the bottom for the installer though and click next. And this will be a typical install. We're not doing anything special with this at all. Let's go ahead and click next and then install. The installation is pretty quick. One of the first things you should notice is that it will refresh the screen and actually make it full screen, not just a little black window box. But it optimizes a lot of features and functions with the server in addition to the screen. Installation's done. Click finish, and it wants to restart your computer. I would suggest that you do that. It asks you to log in once your server reboots. Who's still waiting on that? If you do Control-Delete at this point, it's going to be at your regular computer's Control-Delete, which is your task manager, so you can just close it.
Oh, my handwriting's the password.
You want to write the password? Okay, that's okay. What you want to be doing is actually sending a Control-Alt-Delete to your virtual machine, and you do it two different ways. One way of doing it is from the keyboard. Since it knows there's going to be a conflict between your local computer and the server, it remaps your Control-Alt-Insert to sending a Control-Alt-Delete to another machine. So you can do Control-Alt-Insert on your keyboard, and that's the same as sending a Control-Alt-Delete. The other way of doing it, if I hit cancel, is up in your menus up here is the the three-finger salute is what they call it, the Control-Alt-Delete. You actually send it by clicking on this button. So either you can click the button or you can use the Control-Insert. Of course, you just typed in the password, so you know what it is. Capital P A $W0RD. And you go ahead and log in. At this point, we do in fact want to make some of these initial server configuration changes. Ideally, one of the first activities you would do after installing the server would be to activate it. We're not going to activate this. This is in fact an 180-day evaluation server, so we don't need to activate it. We will change the time zone though, so we're going to click on the time zone. And when we do, it brings up the dialog box to change the time zone. So click on the button for change the time zone. It defaults to Pacific time, which is where Microsoft is located. We are in fact Central Time. UTC -6, Central Time, US and Canada, and click OK. And then click OK again. Normally we'd be giving this a static address for IP version 4. Right now it's assigned through DHCP. We're okay with that. We're not doing a whole lot with this server. We're going to check for its upgradability. We're going to upgrade to server 2012, and that's pretty much all we're doing with this server. So we're not going to spend the time on actually giving a static IP address. To be consistent with the lab exercises, though, we do want to rename our server. It defaults to just some kind of random Windows name, and we want to rename it to Server01. To do that, and that is in the book in one of the exercises, but we want to click on the provide a computer name and a domain. A lot of people start typing things in here. This doesn't do anything. If you read this, it just says computer description. If you want to change the name, you actually have to click the button that says change. So I click on change, and this is where you can change the computer name. And we're going to change it to Server01. It's not case sensitive, so upper, lowercase, whatever, it doesn't make any difference.
I accidentally closed out of my initial config backs.
Okay. Under menus, we have, I thought you could do it underneath here, administrative tools. Oh, search. That's interesting. How do you get there again? There's a way of doing it. Yeah, I'm not sure to get back into the initial configuration per se, but everything can be done right through the control panel. These just launch the control panel applets. Like the time zone is just your time applet, your control panel applet. What we did here is just rename your computer. So you go to Computer and go to Properties, and then this is the same essentially screen. You want to change the computer name, so you click on Change Settings. And that brings you to the same screen as you would. So everything's done. It's just a sort of a consolidated way of getting there. But that is interesting. I'm not sure how to get back there if you do close that. You can always reboot. But that, anyways, it asks you to restart your computer to apply these changes. I'll click close. You want to restart now or restart later? Go ahead and restart now.
I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Server01. So you're going to end up restarting it a couple times. You're going to end up restarting it after we install VMware Tools. We're going to restart it after we rename it. I'm going to log back in again. And at this point, I've done the things I really need to do for initial configuration. The rest I can do through the control panel later if I want to. So I can click on this, do not show this at Windows Logon anymore. And then click close. If I don't want to see it again. Right. And now it does bring up Server Manager, and I can work with Server Manager. At this point, I'm going to end up restarting the computer just one more time, and there's sort of an extra feature or function of this is to take a snapshot. I want to take my machine, it's a base install, I have it configured very basically with my time zone and my machine name, and if I ever want to do anything again, I want to take a snapshot of a virtual machine just as exactly as it is right now. You can do it while it's running, it's just not recommended to do that. If you do it while it's shut down, it's just nice and clean state to do that. So I'm going to shut down your computer, my computer. Don't just click log off. That's the default when you click on the start button. Click the little arrow on the right and then click shutdown. Now, they won't let you shut down for any reason, so you have to put in a reason of why you're shutting this down. And it better be a good reason, otherwise they'll just deny it. Or you can just hit the space bar and click OK. So you can type anything you want, but it does make you type something just for you to shut down your computer. So get used to that. Server 2012 still has to have a reason, but it defaults to 1, so you just click OK. 2008 still, you have to actually type something. So now your machine is down, it's in a state of being closed, and we want to take a snapshot of this. To do that, we go into the VM menu, and we have snapshot, and then we can take a snapshot. I know I'm kind of quickly, but I can catch you up if you need to, and take a snapshot. I usually call mine a base image. If you want to put some descriptive stuff in there, you can. You know, time zone, central time. It's named Server01. You know, whatever you want to put in there. But just having some kind of snapshot. That way, we're going to be installing some map tools on here. We'll even do a full server upgrade to Server 2012. We have a snapshot of our base 2008 image, so we can always come back to this and redo these exercises as many times as you want without having to spend the time of actually installing the server over again. It gives you something to start with. Okay, and now go ahead and turn on the server. If you look under your exercises on page, what is it? 29 is where it starts with the practice exercises. Yeah. The goal of this section is to provide you with hands-on practice with the following. using on the map toolkit, and then also performing an in-place upgrade. It says to perform this exercise, you need a server available for testing. It meets these requirements, blah, blah, blah. Exercise 1. What was it talking about it? Configure the server with an IP address, default gateway, server pending updates. One or more server roles on the server. That's what we're doing. So we're actually getting the exercise 1, step 1, of just getting your server ready for that map toolkit. That's as far as we're going to go today. I'll get you up to that point, and then starting next week, we'll talk a little bit more about it. I'll let you reread chapter 1. We'll talk about it and then actually do this map tool and then do the in-place upgrade. That's what we'll end up doing next week. I'll show you how to do this though. I'm going to log in, Control-Alt-Insert. And it didn't come up to the initial configuration anymore. It just brings you right to Server Manager, which makes a perfect sense to go because this is probably why you're logging onto the server, is to administer the server. Remember we talked about roles and features before on the board and so the differences? You can see what they are underneath here by clicking the little plus sign next to roles and actually clicking right on roles. And you can click on Add a Role and click Next when it comes up to there. These are the different roles of the server. So it can be a directory certificate server, an Active Directory domain server, a federation service, lightweight access protocol, an application server, DHCP server, DNS server, fax server, and so forth. The service we're going to be installing just for this practice server is going to be the web server. It's just going to put something on the server for us to work with. So we're going to install it as a role, so web server. When we click Next, we click Next again, and it says, well, if you're going to install that, you need to install these things, which is Next, and then finally install it. So initially, when you install the server, it doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there. You need to tell it what is the purpose of this server.
If you were to put in a server and you didn't specify the roles,
Yes.
could you go back in after it's done installing and
It-
suggest the roles?
It is done installing. In fact, we were done installing the server, and now we're going to administer it. Now we're going to say this is going to be your role, and you can add and remove roles. So you're going to be a web server, a file server, and a print server. You know what? I'm going to take that web feature away from you, and you go to the exact same spot and you uncheck it, and now it removes that from the server. I want to make this a fax server. I check that box. So you're constantly changing roles. Well, you don't usually, but you can. You can say, I want this to be a file server, I want this to be a print server. No, I don't want you to be. I want to separate them. I want to join them. So this is why it brings you into this management tool right away, so you can add and remove roles as often as you want. And you click Close, and it's done. So web server, if everything looks fine, it installed this, so web server is running on there. Again, if I want, I can click on this, I can remove the role. You know what? I don't want this to be a web server anymore. I'll remove this role, and I want to add a different one instead. I want to add DNS. I'm going to cancel. Don't do DNS. So you sure want to exit the wizard. Features are a little bit different. If I click on features, add a feature, .NET Framework, BitLocker, cluster, failover clustering, Internet Printing Client, Remote Assistance, SMTP, Telnet, TFTP. So I guess those are the types of, let's talk about features. So features and functions, or features and roles, are just a little bit different. Most of the time you're working with roles though. So it's going to be a web server or whatever. And so now I've installed it. And now your web server is ready to run. It is running, in fact, right now. So you install the server, you gave it a password, you configured its time zone, You, let's see, what else do we do? We gave it a name, and we installed a role onto the server. Feeling pretty good about that? Okay. We can go ahead and shut that down then. Next week we'll pick up from there and actually look at the map tool and then the in-place migration.
Were those comments saved anywhere when we shut down?